Well, I've got the tank partly out. I've got everything cut loose, but the tank is like a more than tight fit in the corners here coming out. And I've actually had to take my reciprocal saw and kind of drop down between the tank and the sidewalls here. I'm trying to trim the sidewalls mostly. What it is, it fit until it got right to the edge, and then where they glass that over, the fiberglass made it tighter. And so I'm having to kind of trim that fiberglass, but also I'm trimmed off a little bump that was on the tank right from here to here too. Don't think that's a problem. I'll double check that when I get the tank out. There is some diesel fuel in it. There's not much, but there is some. So it's a bit heavy. It's a bit awkward. But it has been a bear to get out. It's like all things boat, it's never easy. If they had made the tank a ½ inch narrower, it would have cleared almost everything, and it wouldn't have made any difference on how much fuel it held. But they've got the tank kind of made it a bit of a wedge, and then the bottom slopes uphill. But once I get this tank out of here, then I can somewhat easily get to everything else, I think. And I'll drain that tank completely, and before I ever put it back, make it as light as possible. But anyway, it's been a bit of an ordeal, and absolutely no way that I could film it. I mean, it's just there's just no room in there for anything other than one hand kind of thing. Okay, so I pretty much got it out. I may have to pump the fuel out of it to get it out of the boat. It's just a bit heavy. Well, I just took a little electric fuel pump and I took out the vent outlet and stuck a hose down in there, and I'm pumping the fuel out into a 5-gallon diesel can. I just took my battery out of the fishing boat and brought it out here temporarily to run it with. So I can take this old fuel here. I don't know how old it is. Probably not that old, but it's a few years old probably. But anyway, you can just take and filter it really good and use it. You just have to get all that crud out of it. And if you put the biobore or the algicide in it, it can kill it. But then all that is what clogs your filters, is all that dead algae. So, but I will take and try to filter this diesel and not let it go to waste. Run it through a couple of filters, and really fine filters. I've got a couple of Raycor filters I'll run it through, and I think they call it polishing the fuel. So, like I said, the fuel is good. It's just you got to get all the crud out of it and all the water out of it too, because it'll have a lot of condensation in it from temperature changes. The other thing about really, really old diesel fuel, you can actually get pretty sick messing with it. You can get a really bad sinus infection. It's about impossible to clear up. A lot of diesel mechanics occasionally get it, and when you're working with really old equipment. So keep that in mind if you're working with really, really old diesel fuel. It actually can make you sick. But I don't think this is that old. And I've got a mask on, just to hopefully keep it out of there. Okay, so there's 5 gallons of it, and there's still more in it. So I don't know. I really didn't think it had this much in it, but I'll go take this out of the boat and go get another diesel can. I think I got another one around somewhere. Well, I pumped out about 12 or 13 gallons of diesel fuel out of that tank to get it down light enough to get it out of here. It still had a little bit in it, that's hard to get out of the very, very bottom. But I was able to get it out and just carried it up the steps and loaded it over the side of the boat with a rope. So now I've got that area back there behind the stairs where I can get in there now. Build me a little temporary floor of some kind that back through there to lay on where I can work. Well, that sheave back there, the pin or the shaft pin, the bottom and top cotter keys were missing, and the shaft had worked its way out, almost completely out. That pulley was just before falling out of its housing because that whole center shaft was had worked its way almost completely out. It was coming out the upper side rather than the bottom side though, but it was just barely in there. So that was a disaster waiting to happen. So I'm glad I got hold of that. Everything's in good shape. It's just like the bottom pin was missing. So I replaced the pins, the cotter keys. So that's back in. And on the other side, the bottom pin or cotter key, and it was made out of brass, by the way, and it had just kind of worn through and broken, and it was just about ready to fall out or almost missing too. So on the port side, given a little bit more time, that one would have worked its way out as well, I guess. So I've replaced the cotter keys on them and got them back together. So that part's done. I've got the cables out and pulled out through the top of the pedestal outside. Two of the nuts came off of the bolts that hold the pedestal on, and two of them, the bolts sheared off. So I'll be replacing all those bolts for sure, and then you can see how rusty that backing plate is. I mean, it's just like layered rust, just completely corroded away. The sheave housings are bronze, and they're attached with stainless ferrules to a mild steel backing plate. So, and then you got water coming in, so you got three different metals there together. And then salt water, so it's kind of inevitable. So I've got it. I got to try to bump those bolts out, the two that didn't break off, and then all that can come off. I've got the wiring harness that went to the compasses ready to pull out, and my cables are ready to pull out. My shifter and throttle cables ready to pull out. The quadrant looks like it's in really good shape. But the shaft, the rudder shaft, has a little bit of corrosion right here. There may be a little bit on the other side too. I can't tell you. But this is the packing gland for that rudder shaft. So I've still got to take that apart where I can rebuild it. But at least I've got a little bit of room to work in here. Better than it was. And you can see I just put a piece of plywood in here to lay on. So, but it's 7 feet back up in there probably from where the companionway steps are at. It's about, it's probably 7 feet back in there. So it's a pretty good ways back in there. But like I said, there's enough room to maneuver and work. And I've got that backing plate down. And you can see most of it just broke off into just crumbs. Just big flakes, You can see there it was completely rotted away, rusted away. And those two bolts up here are going to be frozen, the housing of the pedestal on the top side. All 4 of them will be. I'll have to put some heat on them or something to get them to break loose. And it's water dripping out of it. So you can see where the core is soaking wet around it. All 3 of these holes here, core's gone. Okay, so I've got everything out. Got the pedestal completely out and everything else loose. So the next step, I guess, is going to be to cut out however much fiberglass up there I need to cut out to get beyond where it's rotten. And then I have to wait for some warmer weather. I can throw heaters in here, but it's still going to be cold on the outside, so I'm going to have to wait for some warm weather for the next week and a half. At least it's supposed to be, you know, like 17 or 18 or 19 in the mornings and 35 to 45 for highs in the day. So it's not looking like I'm going to be able to do any fiberglass work in this boat, at least for the next couple of weeks probably. So it'll end up being probably after the first of the year before I'm going to be able to do it. I'll just have to catch a nice couple of pretty days, and I can cut it out and clean it out and get everything ready and prepped, but no fiberglass work when it's so cold. Well, it's 32 degrees this morning, and it's supposed to warm up into the low 40s this afternoon, and it's dry. It's no rain or anything right now, so I don't have water dripping on my head where I'd taken that pedestal loose, so I'm going to try to get in here and cut this out. I've marked it with a white pen. You might be able to see it there. What I'm going to cut out, at least initially, it's about 16 by 32 probably that I'm going to cut out. Try to get beyond where it's rotten, or at least do my best to. But I'm going to use my little multi-tool there, oscillating tool, and just try to cut the glass off of it first and get that peeled off, and then I'll have that kind of like as a pattern for the piece of wood I need to put back in maybe. And then I'll try to dig out the rotten wood. It may go beyond what I've marked, but I just need to get a starting point to cut. Go from there. So I'm gonna get my safety gear on here and get to it, I guess. It's a little nippy in here this morning. It has been, the last week it's been like 10 degrees, 16, 17 degrees, 18 degrees, that kind of thing, you know, 20. Early this morning it was in the 20s. It's warmed up to 32 now. We've had some strong wind from that storm, like most people across the country had too. So we had wind chills down to about 0. So been a little bit chilly. But I'm gonna try to get this cut out this morning. Okay, I got the piece cut out that I was aiming for to start with, at least to cut out. That's the piece there. That's that bottom skin of fiberglass that encompassed the 3 holes that was going through that cockpit. So unfortunately the rot goes beyond that in several places, but I've got to leave enough of this that old glass bottom layer in there to bond back to, so I'm gonna have to just dig it out and put it in 2 halves, possibly. Have to figure that out after I get it all cleaned out. And the wood is frozen. You know, the water it was in it is frozen solid, so I can't just easily scrape it out. So I'm gonna have to go get hammer and chisel and see what I can do to get it out. I'd love to get it out while it is frozen, so I don't have so much water everywhere. Plywood gets like a sponge when it gets wet. I'm going to try to show you what I've got cut out here. I've got all the wet, rotten wood cut out, but it's going to take several days, at least, if not weeks, for it to dry out good enough for me to do a proper job of repairing it. But there's what I've got cut out. And on this end, I've got it cut out all the way up to where they used a foam core. So from here back toward the front, all this up here is solid and it's foam core. But right here back, it was cored with plywood, just regular like CDX, half-inch CDX plywood, you know, set against that upper skin, you know, with resin, and the bottom skin, you know, put over it with resin. But it all rotted out, and it rotted out all the way to the edge where it turns up. Where it turns up, there's no core. It's just solid fiberglass, 2 layers, double-sided, like a liner, I guess you'd say. And that's glassed into the storage compartments under the cockpit seats. All that's tabbed in, solid all the way around. So I've got it all dug out all the way around the whole perimeter here, all the way back to solid glass, all the way around, all 4 sides. And I've got to decide how I'm going to repair this. I've got a couple of possibilities here, and I haven't decided which way I'm going to go yet. I'm going to try to instill just a tiny bit of crown in that floor, which it probably originally was either dead flat or slightly crowned. Right now it's got a little tiny bit of a sag right where the pedestal was at, on that upper skin. So whatever I do, I will get that back either leveled or ever so slightly crowned to make sure that water doesn't puddle around the base of that pedestal. But I've got 2 or 3 different ways I can do this, and I just haven't quite made my mind up yet. It looks like it was cored with like half-inch plywood. Best I can tell, that's what was in it. So anyway, right now I've just got an oak board, 1x12 oak board up there, screwed through all those holes just to keep some of the water out, some of the rain out, and to stiffen that up there so I can step on it without, you know, pushing it down. But I'm going to have to let it dry out. I'm going to have to let it dry out for a good while, you know, to make sure it's completely dry. And then I'll come back with either a grinder or a bronze wire brush wheel on a drill and try to get off all that little bit of a skim of wood fibers that's still stuck in that resin on the bottom side there. But it's too wet to mess with it right now. I've got to let it dry out. And then I'll come back and get the last little bit of that wood fibers off of that resin and get it prepped so it'll bond to whatever I put back. So, but it's kind of tight in here. It's hard to video things like this when you're actually doing the work. It's really hard to do much. So it really wasn't that hard to cut it out, and there's plenty of room to work, you know, to do what I'm doing. But there's not much room for anything else, so it's just really kind of hard to video it. But I took out probably a 5-gallon bucket full of soaking wet rotten plywood fibers, and it was so wet you could take your hand and just squeeze it and water drip out of it, kind of thing. So I've got to let all that up there dry. I did put a tarp on the outside to keep rainwater out. So I just put a spar, an aluminum spar from another boat up here, a small one, to kind of give me a ridge line up there. And then I just put a 16x20 tarp around. Got it where I can get in and out right there, and then drop it back down when I'm not in the boat. That lets a little bit of airflow under for airflow, but it'll keep the rain, at least the majority of the rain, out of this area down here, you know, where I'm trying to keep dry. And it also covers it up here as well, but yet still gives me some ventilation up there. So the nastiest of the tear out is done. Once that's all dry, I'll get in there and vacuum all that out. Right now it's just wet, soggy little chips laying everywhere. So I'll let all that dry out and then I'll vacuum it out good. Easier to get it up when it's dry. And I may take that quadrant off and drop that rudder. Not sure. This packing gland right here, that's an Edson brand. It looks pretty cruddy. I'm going to take a brass wire brush and clean it up really good and see what I've got. But it looks a little cruddy. But what has happened is the packing has probably never been replaced. So, you know, it was just getting a little bit of, that's above the waterline. It's several inches above the waterline, but that don't mean you can't occasionally get a slosh of water up through there. But I think what was happening was the leaking was coming down through here and coming down and dripping all over this quadrant here and running down that shaft and just running down there. But it does look like it may have been wet with salt water at some point in time too with that corrosion. But I'm going to clean it up really good. And if it looks like it's questionable, I'll just order another one and just replace it. They are glassed in. The bottom half of it is actually glassed into the rudder post housing there. So if I do replace it, I have to cut that out and glass a new one in. And I'll have to take the quadrant off, which I think I can get that off without dropping the rudder, but if I need to drop the rudder, I will. But at the very least, I've got to repack that. And I can get it. You can still buy these. Edson still makes them. And you can buy the packing for them and everything. It's not very expensive. So at the very minimum, you know, I'll clean it up really good. Inspect it, make sure it's not, doesn't look too corroded once it's clean. And repack it at least. Probably maybe replace the bolts too. It's got stainless steel bolts, but it's a bronze housing. Anyway, that's where I'm at on it. Hurry up and wait kind of thing. Like I say, got it all cleaned out and actually got a couple of warm enough days to where I could do some fiberglass in a couple of days. But it won't be dry enough by then. I'll have to wait and catch it another time after, but maybe it'll at least help it dry out. Good.